Hello everyone, it's Tom Slater here. We'll get into this brilliant episode of Last Orders with Leo Kearse in just one moment. But before we do that, I just want to let you all know about a very exciting online event that we've got coming up. On the 29th of August at 7 p.m, Brendan O'Neill will be live and in conversation with Michael Shellenberger. Michael will be known to many of you, I'm sure, as a best-selling author. He's one of the journalists behind the Twitter Files and all-round good egg, and he'll be joining Brendan for a live on Zoom edition of Brendan's podcast, The Brendan O'Neill Show. The event is completely free for Spike supporters, so if you are already a Spike supporter, just go to the online hub now to claim your free ticket. But if you're not a Spike supporter, now is surely the best time to sign up. For just £5 a month, you can claim your free ticket to this event, future events, as well as access all kinds of exclusive perks, including ad-free reading on Spikes. You can access our comment section, you can get discounts in our shop, and much more. So once again, that's Brendan O'Neill and Michael Shellenberger live and on Zoom on the 29th of August. Claim your ticket now on the Spiked Hub or go to spiked-online.com/supporters to become a supporter and to sign up. Thanks so much. And now on with the show. Welcome to Last Orders, the Spike podcast on all things nanny state. In this episode, we discuss free speech at the Edinburgh Fringe, the crusade against ultra-processed food, and why posh middle-aged liberals ruin everything. Hello and welcome to Last Orders. I'm Tom Slater, editor of Spiked, joined as I am in every episode by Chris Snowdon from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Tom. Hello, listeners.
And we're delighted to welcome back to the show today stand-up comedian and GB News presenter Leo Kearse. Leo, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. Hello, everybody.
So, Leo, let's start with you because you're both a comedian and Scottish, so surely this is going to be up your alley. So talk a little bit about the Edinburgh Fringe, really. Because there's been a couple of stories that have been floating around it this week. It's kicking off, or it's just kicked off, I believe. And it's usually not long before some kind of free speech battle kicks off. I think, was it last year or 2 years ago, that it was Jerry Sadowitz being banned because of a few people who were working at his show got upset. This time around, similar story, although it's not a comedian. It's Joanna Cherry, the SNP Member of Parliament, who has had this very strange kind of protracted legal battle with The Stand, one of the big venues in Edinburgh, because she was going to take part in a kind of Q&A session. Originally, they banned it again, seemingly at the behest of members of staff who were upset because she happens to hold gender-critical views. She challenged this legally. They've now had to back down and hold the event, but they're doing so with bag searches. They're banning the bar. What's going on with this particular story? Were you surprised to see someone like Joanna Cherry get that kind of reception at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival?
Yeah, because she was actually invited to speak at The Stand, as I understand it. I mean, The Stand is owned by, was founded and is still owned by Tommy Shepherd, who's an SNP Member of Parliament. And she is as well. And we've seen sort of trans rights and gender stuff being used as a weapon in the SNP before against Joanna Cherry. So Nicola Sturgeon got Joanna Cherry deposed from the front bench of the SNP by claiming that she's a transphobe or whatever. And then this seems to have been weaponized again. Staff at The Stand complained that she's transphobic, and then they cancelled her show. And then that was she, because she's a lawyer as well. She said, "Well, look, this is this is a breach of, I can't remember what law, but it's basically discrimination. You're discriminated against her for having absolutely valid views." So then the show was put back on, and now they've as we're seeing now, they're introducing bag searches and all this enhanced security to make sure there isn't any violence from people who are from the transgender lobby who could go there and attack her, because as we all know, Scottish transgender people they're real women, and one of the things that real women do is commit lots of violence. They'll throw pint glasses at women on stage and stuff like that. It's just when you transition, you pick up those female attributes. So yeah, I mean it's pretty ridiculous, and it's one of those things that really makes this I don't know. I think for a normal person watching it who isn't, a blue-haired 19-year-old caught up in the sort of online world that calls J.K. Rowling a witch and Joanna Cherry a hateful Hitler-like bigot. I think for most people, they'll be like, "Well, this is ridiculous. Of course, you can have these views, even if I can understand somebody not agreeing with them. But of course, you can have these views, and it makes the trans rights activists look ridiculous."
And just before I bring Chris in, Leo, because this is another example of a performance, a show, whatever you'd like to call it, being shut down seemingly at the behest of the junior members of staff at that particular venue. So we mentioned the Jerry Sadowitz case. I also believe it was when Terry Gilliam was at the old or the young Vic, I forget which, with his latest production. Again, it was allegedly members of staff who complained, which led them basically showing him the door, despite the fact there's a hugely bankable figure. Is this something that you kind of anecdotally have also sort of seen in the industry, I guess, where it's not at the behest of audience members who've got upset? It's not about even pissing off management. It's about pissing off the person, taking the tickets at the door.
Yeah, I mean, I'm banned from the stand.
The
stand is an interesting one because it's owned by essentially by the SNP. It's owned by an SNP MP, Tommy Sheppard. So, I mean, can you imagine like a comedy club owned by a political party? It's like, it's like in
a weird sort of way. That sounds like most comedy clubs these days. The Uniparty is sort of the
the blob.
Owner,
the blob party, but yeah, the Kim Jong-un comedy club. Come and feel free to say what you like as long as you don't criticize Kim Jong-un. I mean it's ridiculous. And yeah, we're seeing this the 19-year-olds with blue hair. They've got some shitty job punching tickets at a theatre or a comedy venue, feeling that they have the right, and for some reason people are listening to them. It's like if your staff come and say, well, we've decided that this person shouldn't be on stage. Like, well, go get another fucking job. Go work in fucking McDonald's. It's an absolute nonsense. There's no what gives these people the right to become the arbiters of what appears on stage. It's an absolute nonsense. It's like, you wouldn't get to the airport and like the guy driving the bus to the airport is like, no, well, you're not allowed to fly to Tenerife. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. It's just ridiculous.
And why were you banned from the stand, Leo? I can't let that one slide.
Oh, because I slag off the SNP and, I slag off the stand. But funnily enough, I did tryouts for the stand, and they're very socialist, man. Every single MC at the stand is some just fat, pointy glasses, 50s style lass who's completely unfunny and has pronouns and stuff. And so when I did my trial spots at the stand like ages and ages ago, which is before sort of all this woke stuff, really kicked off, I went and did like my most right-wing sort of like, I was pro Maggie Thatcher, man, but I had them all cheer. I went the Newcastle stand, and I think I did the Edinburgh stand as well, and I had them like cheering, the audience cheering for Maggie Thatcher, and like I knew I wasn't going to get asked back after going right into the heart of the left-wing place and getting them cheering for Maggie Thatcher. But man, yeah, I mean the stand is they've only got a business because. In Newcastle, there's no competition. The Hyena shut down. I think in Glasgow, there's a lot more comedy clubs starting up. Got some really good ones. You got the Glee. You got Alan Anderson's club at the Rotunda, and Edinburgh. There's other stuff starting up. So I think the stand are going to struggle. If they stick to this sort of real censorious attitude. Nobody wants to go and have a bad time and get lectured.
And Chris, what do you make of this Joanna Cherry story? I mean, it was hardly a surprise, but do you feel like things are getting more intense, even more so intense in the kind of trans debate at the moment?
I don't know, really. I mean, it's been like this for a few years, hasn't it now? Whether it's getting worse or not, you hear about these weird examples of things, and someone like me who doesn't go to many comedy clubs doesn't really know what it's like out there. But when I do, it doesn't seem like very much has changed. And the thing about comedy is you can't really fake it. If it's not funny, people don't laugh. And if they don't laugh, they eventually realise they're going to stop going. So maybe part of the problem here is just state subsidisation of the arts. It seems to me that the organisations that get away with this kind of censorship tend to either have, I think Leo was saying this is sort of SNP owned, doesn't it, Leo? Or do they have some kind of sugar daddy?
Yeah, so Tommy Sheppard Tommy Shepherd founded it and still owns it. I mean, they got a board or whatever, but yeah, Tommy Shepherd's still the main guy.
Yes, I mean, I suppose it's his gaff, it's his rules, but at the end of the day, unfunny comedy can't really be a sustainable business. And all the people, I think we talked about this before, Tom, all the people on Netflix who make an absolute killing seem to be the ones who are directly going for the anti-woke dollar. Let's stop subsidising the arts. If people want to own their own clubs and do daft things in it, I suppose that's up to them. Whether it's getting any worse, honestly, I don't know, Tom. Do you think it's getting worse, Leo?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's. Yeah, also the audiences seem to feel more empowered and more likely to come forward and either sort of willfully misunderstand stuff. There's a comedian, Jeff Innocent, who does all this stuff about. So he's in a mixed race relationship, and he does this stuff. Talking about he looks. He's got like a shaved head and stuff, so he looks like he could be. It could be in the National Front or whatever, but. He does all this stuff playing with the ideas. This stuff obviously isn't racist, but because he's talking about these themes, he sometimes gets drunk people misunderstanding what he's saying and then kicking off. And I think, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people, if they didn't really understand something, they'd maybe have more, they'd have good faith in the comedian that, I just wasn't paying attention or whatever. Now, despite it obviously being career suicide for somebody to get up on stage in a central London comedy club and be like, yeah, you know what, we should, to say some, horrifically racist. So nobody's saying anything horrifically racist because you wouldn't get booked again. But he gets complaints against him, and it's a real shame because he's an amazing comedian and obviously not a racist at all. Myself, I used to do a show, like a solo show, just myself for an hour every month at Top Secret Comedy Club in London. And somebody genuinely wrote this complaint email in that said, we came to see Leo's show in July and it was horrific and offensive. And we came back to see it again in October and he was still horrific. And it's like, why are you coming back? There's other comedians out there. I don't know. People, I think that was just somebody lying to try and get me cancelled. But most, I don't know, some promoters like Top Secret are great. They just, they have faith in the comedians, and they'll also sort of let you make mistakes because you need to make mistakes when you're on stage. You need to try ideas out and see what works and what doesn't. You've got to sort of be able to crash the car to see how fast you can go. But other comedians, and certainly the gatekeepers to like the BBC and the sort of the industry stuff. They're certainly getting a lot tighter, and I think that's GB News is like the sort of best place for comedy on TV at the moment. I don't mean that in terms of their news reporting.
But you do Headliners, the show with stand-up comedians doing the sort of evening paper review sort of setup.
Yes, there's Headliners, which is on 11 p.m. every night, and it's three comedians going through the next day's news stories, and obviously comedians are usually pretty informed about what's going on as well. And there's also Free Speech Nation with Andrew Doyle, who's an amazing, just one of the sharpest minds, one of the brightest and best satirists of contemporary culture, and also, even stuff like Mark Dolan's show. He's a comedian, so even though it's not a comedy show, he brings that sort of it's a fun show to watch.
It was about a year ago, wasn't it? Jerry Sadowitz got cancelled at the Fringe, right?
Yeah.
And I, on the back of that, immediately bought a ticket for him in the Comedian in Brighton. I first saw Jerry Sadowitz probably 25 years ago. Obviously, he can't get on TV for love of money, but he never has been able to, right? Because he has this extremely incendiary, provocative show. And he hasn't changed it one bit since I first saw him. He hasn't changed it since the 80s, I suppose. And I saw him in Brighton. He went down an absolute storm, as he always has done when I've seen him before. And if that's in Brighton and there was nobody kicking off, including the staff, I presume, I don't know, maybe you can still get away with quite a bit.
Mm. He sold out the Hammersmith Apollo, I think, after that controversy. So it goes to show how, and on that case, it was nice to see actually comedians, even of a very squishy liberal left bent, kind of stand up and say, hold on a second, because he was so fated, in the kind of alternative, amongst even the alternative comedy set.
Not every single one of them, though.
No, not at all. But more than you'd think.
But that's what really surprised me about that, because I thought, they come for Roy Chubby Brown, they come for Jim Davidson. I don't expect the comedy establishment to stick their neck out and be like, no, wait a minute, don't cancel comedians. But when they came for Jerry Sadowitz, that's one of their own. He's worked with, he's done TV stuff with Stuart Lee. He's definitely he's part of that alternative comedy scene that came through. And yeah, man, loads of comedians came out and slagged him off and said, oh, you shouldn't be saying this stuff. And man, all comedians are way shitter than Jerry Sadowitz, who's infuriating, you know what I mean? And then Alfie Brown, who is definitely, right embedded in that sort of lefty establishment of comedy. He got in trouble because some old stuff surfaced of him, using racial epithets. Obviously not in a racist way, but the fact that it's a white man using them was just enough. And man, loads of comedians came out, and it's funny how nobody wants to be the witch. Like as soon as the teenage girls point and say that's the witch, everybody's like, yeah, that's the witch. Oh, it's not me. It's it's mad. That witch hunt mentality is still totally there. And that's why, man, I thought Alfie Brown was he pussied out and he apologized. And I was just like, man, why would you? As soon as he apologized, it gave them, he admits that they're right and gives them fuel. And I thought that was ridiculous.
And just before we move on, I want to talk about briefly one other story from the Fringe, which is quite funny. Doesn't sound funny when we start off, but Georgie Greer, who's a kind of writer and performer, has become one of the big kind of stories of the Fringe because of the fact that one person showed up to her show. She starts crying. And what do you do when you start crying? You take a picture of yourself crying and you post it on the internet and you say, I'm very upset. Is this normal? All kinds of big name comedians piled in to give us support. Dara O'Brien, Jason Manford, who was never one to pass up a woman in distress, sent her a message of encouragement. And this has become a big story. She kind of sold out her next night and so on. Since then, it's been pointed out she posted a pretty similar post last year. So whether or not she's just quite an emotional person or whether or not this might have been a tactic is something which is being debated. But Leo, have you ever posted a tearful photo of yourself to the ends of self-promotion, or what did you make of this story?
I don't think I have, but I can fully believe that an actress can cry once a year authentically. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know. I thought people always post stuff like that. Especially an actress at the Fringe is going to post some tearful thing. I don't think it was that cynical, and it totally worked for her. She's definitely going to do it next year. But yeah, I mean, I thought, yeah, fair play to her. I mean, with stuff like that, if you're going to post some tearful thing online, man, obviously it's she knows what she's doing. She could have just cried to her friend on the phone or whatever. But yeah, I mean, it worked for her. I don't know if the show's any good. And everybody performs to a handful of people at the Fringe. I remember I did a show to 8 people. It was my day off, but I hadn't put my day off in the flyer. So I just turned up to see if anybody turned up because they'd been flyered. And yeah, 8 people were there. And it was honestly one of the best shows of the run. So yeah, but I guess doing comedy to one person is tougher. I've sometimes done private gigs. I've done private gigs to to people in hotel rooms and stuff, and there's just 6 of them. And yeah, it can totally work when it's a tiny crowd.
So words of encouragement there. Anything to stand out, I imagine, at the Fringe is par for the course. But
yeah, just before we go on to that, can I just recommend? So there's some free speech comedy at the Fringe. There's a show called Hating Live that I co-founded it, but I'm not at the Fringe now. But Hating Live is like improvised hatred. So you write down what you hate, it goes in a bucket, and then we pull it out, and the comedians have to say why they hate that thing, no matter what it is. You know what I mean? Obviously, we filter out, if there's any, overtly, racist stuff or anything. But as long as you're not putting the N-word in there or something like that, man, whatever you put in there, the comedians are going to hate on it. There's nowhere to hide on stage. It's destroyed many careers. It's brilliant. And also Darius Davies, he's doing a show called Charmingly Offensive. And yeah, he's one of these. He's one of these people who can say whatever he likes on stage and get away with it somehow. So they're my 2 picks for free speech at the Fringe.
Brilliant. So moving on, let's talk about something that's been a recurring topic on this podcast, which is the crusade against ultra-processed food, particularly mounted by a gentleman called Chris Van Tuliken, who, Chris, has become your kind of Bête Noire, I think it's fair to say. You've been writing a lot about him, reviewing his book. What's the latest on Van Tuliken and his arguments? And also, I suppose, for the benefit of Leo as well as our listeners, just give us a reminder of what this whole ultra-processed food thing is about.
Well, the latest news, Tom, is I've actually got around to reading his book, which I've now reviewed. It's been taking me a while. It was 25 quid, and Amazon were not discounting it even by a penny. And then the other day, it suddenly dropped to £12. And I thought, right, I've said enough about this fella. I should read his book. Honestly, it was worse. It was worse than I thought. I've actually written a 6,000-word 2-part review about it, and even that only scratches the surface of my issues with this book. So, ultra processed food, Leo, and listeners, is it's got a very scientific definition. It's anything wrapped in plastic that contains an ingredient that you wouldn't have in your own kitchen. So we're dealing with pretty robust science straight away here. Nothing arbitrary about that definition. And he basically says this stuff kills you, makes you fat, gives you depression, gives you penile shrinkage, makes you infertile, everything under the sun, based on some pretty sloppy evidence. And I was hoping in this book he would explain how this food does it, right? What's the biological mechanism by which it does it? And he kind of goes through various different possibilities, like is it addictive? Is it very soft and so people eat too much of it? Is it just tastier than normal food? Or is it the additives? Because the additives really are the defining characteristic of this stuff. These are the things that you don't have in your kitchen, right? I can't really, in a brief podcast, cannot describe all the things that are wrong with it, other than to say that a lot of the science, I mean, it doesn't even, what he says about various studies doesn't even reflect what the studies themselves say. The best example, something I put on Twitter, is he's got this weird idea that no matter how much exercise you do, you'll always burn the same number of calories, which immediately strikes nearly anybody as being a weird thing to say, because we all know that athletes get through thousands and thousands of calories. We know ourselves in our own lives, if we do a bit of exercise, then we tend to maintain a healthy weight. If we slob around, we put on weight. But he thinks it's all about the food, right? The whole book has got to be directed towards there is no solution to this other than getting rid of ultra-processed food. So willpower doesn't work. Even he doesn't even blame sugar and carbs and all the trendy things in the last 10 years. It's just about ultra-processed food. And so he has to dismiss the value of physical activity. And he claims in his book that there's a study showing that coal miners, who obviously have a pretty strenuous job, they only burn off about 2,500 calories a day, which is the same as an office worker in the West. But if you look at the actual study, it says that they burn off 2,500 calories per shift. That's not what they're burning off over the course of the day. That's what they're burning off in 8 hours. And then the other 16 hours, they burn a lot more. And overall, the most physically active miners are burning off like 4,500 calories. So the study that he cites to prove his point actually completely disproves his point. And there's various other things like that in the book. And while I was putting this review out, just after it had gone online, he kind of doubled down on this stuff with a tweet responding to somebody, which he claimed that there was a consensus amongst academics that burning calories doesn't burn calories effectively. He says this has been shown over a huge number of studies and species using multiple different methods. The idea that you can burn off calories with exercise comes almost entirely from research funded by the soft drink industry. Now that tweet now has a community note on it saying exercise has been found to burn calories in many studies, funding through different means.
I love those community notes. They're so useful.
Yeah, they're pretty good, aren't they? Best thing Elon's done. And then it links to like a study from Harvard University showing this fairly obvious demonstration of the second law of thermodynamics.
And just, I've read the first part of your review, Chris. I'll wait the second. But there was one bit that really struck me, because I think when we talked about him last time, he goes at lengths to talk about how your kind of artisan bakery bread is so much more superior to your Hovis in the bag. Is it? And am I right in thinking that he also suggests that like an artisan pizza is fine, but like one you buy for £1.50 in the shop isn't, for some reason? Like, is it at this point he just seems to be? Yeah, he seems to be aesthetically upset by ultra processed food, but he's actually claiming that like a pizza with a sourdough base or something is infinitely healthier than your frozen option.
Yeah, he literally says that. He just asserts that a £1 cheap frozen pizza is proven to cause obesity, death, diet-related disease. But a £10 pizza shop from the pizza shop he actually names in the book as being down his road, which is some leafy part of London, he says that's absolutely fine. And to my knowledge, there is no evidence whatsoever suggesting that, unless, of course, there is fundamental differences in the pizza. But he actually specifies that even if these pizzas have exactly the same number of calories, same amount of sugar, salt, so on, the cheap one will be worse for you. It's just food snobbery, and some of it sometimes quite explicitly snobbish, and also anti-capitalist as well. So in the book, he says that his wife considers mineral water to be an ultra-processed food because it is marketed heavily and sold for profit, which is really speaking the quiet bit out loud.
Have you encountered this ultra-processed food crusade, Leo?
Well, I read a bit about this book in The Economist, which took a slightly different tack to Chris. But yeah, no, I think, I mean, the trouble with any book like this, it's got to be so sensational. It's got to be like, everything you've read is wrong, and that's why, every week, we flip-flop on whether butter or whatever is good or bad for you in the papers. But I think he's got a point with some of this stuff, because I know that, we've got all these food intolerances. People are like, oh, I'm gluten intolerant, I can't eat wheat or whatever. And it's not, you can't eat processed wheat. Like the way bread used to be made, it was like fermented for like 24 hours or longer with yeast. So, the yeast breaks down all those like harsh starches and makes it digestible. The digestive process starts in the fermentation. Now, it's much cheaper to actually industrially process the flour and put in raising agents instead of the yeast sort of making it rise itself. So you're eating all these really harsh, long chain starches that haven't been broken down. Your gut can't digest properly. So I can totally understand that. But I mean, obviously, man, he's hamming it right up to try and sell some copies.
Chris, any more on this, or should we go to our your opportunity to bash Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, which I'm looking forward to?
Let's bash Hugh, yeah.
Let's do it. So while we're on the topic of Chris Van Tuliken and his local artisan pizzeria, Chris, you also want to talk about the broader theme of middle-class centrist bores and how they're kind of ruining absolutely everything. I know you've flagged up Lord Bethel and his recent kind of mea culpa in The Guardian about having previously run the Ministry of Sound and now feeling terribly bad about the pressure that's put on the NHS or something. And then also Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, who seems to be now kind of just jumping in on every sort of anti-Tory talking point going. So what's going on with the centrist dads and why is it irritating you so much?
Yeah, it's not even, it's a more specific subset of the centrist dads. It's the kind of washed up, publicly educated, middle-aged, life crisis centrist dads trying to keep themselves relevant. So Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, who is staggeringly posh, and I don't want to get into the inverted snobbery here, but it is, I don't think it's coincidence that a lot of these people are really but he's from the landed gentry, literally, Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall. Lord Bethel, I always assumed was a life peer, but it turns out he's actually a hereditary peer. He's a 5th Baron Bethel. And I just wish these people would stick to shooting grouse or whatever, because every time they try and give themselves some relevance, like Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, all his restaurants, I think, are closed down. He hasn't been on TV for 20 years, or maybe he has, but he hasn't been a celebrity as such for a long time. He left about £4 million of debt, by the way, when his TV company also went bust recently. So this is a guy clearly having a midlife crisis. But he's still on Twitter, so he can still get his message out there. And when Greenpeace attacked Rishi Sunak's house recently, he put a tweet out going, I love Greenpeace, especially when they do this kind of stuff. Perhaps they can also fill up his swimming pool with oil. He seems to love the stuff so much. I'm sure he'd enjoy wallowing it. It's just, he's such a tryhard. And remember when he sort of became Jamie Oliver's wingman?
On like plastics or something he got involved with or something,
It was on the sugar tax, really. Jamie Oliver had been campaigning about this for a while, and suddenly Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall turns up, like the sort of Penfold to Oliver's Danger Mouse. And it's just like, why is this fella suddenly back in the public eye? It's so easy to get in the public eye if you take on these really, actually quite basic causes that you don't really know a great deal about. Lord Bethel, like I say, used to run the Ministry of Sound a very long time ago. He should just be off in his stately home, in my opinion, minding his own business. But no, he's going to come back. What's he going to come back talking about? Oh, obesity. Oh, how original. What are his policies for obesity? They're going to be then basically nicked off Henry Dimbleby, another Nepo baby. Right? I'm nothing against Henry Dimbleby. He's a fairly nice guy, but he's another fellow who's, he also used to own some restaurants, but now he doesn't. So what's he going to do with his time? Well, he's going to try and remake the entire food supply in a very unrealistic way. And You can go on. And Chris Van Tulleken himself, another public educated, he's vaguely attached in some way to the Dutch aristocracy, I believe. George Monbiot, James O'Brien, all these people. It's just, there's always elites in society, obviously, right? There's no point trying to think that there ever won't be elites. But it seems to me that a lot of these people should be vicars. If it hadn't been for the decline in the Church of England, normally sort of your nice but dim poshos would become vicars, and they would be fairly harmless doing that. But instead of doing that, or instead of directly going into politics, they sort of hang around writing terrible books and writing terrible Guardian articles about things they don't really understand very well. And Chris Van Tulleken clearly doesn't really understand nutrition, even though he's a doctor, and he probably knows a lot about virology, which is what he trained in. And they all review each other's books, Tom.
Mm.
And on that basis, I would like to introduce a new section to the show. I'm going to give you 5 books. You've probably read all these books. And I'm going to read you the quotes from various minor celebrities, and you have to guess which book they are talking about. Okay? You might want a paper and pen. Listeners at home, if you want to play along at home, you might want to write names of these books down. They are as follows, right? 52 Times Britain Was a Bell End by James Fenton. How to Be Right by James O'Brien.
Love it. How
to Expect the Unanticipated, The Science of Making Predictions and the Art of When Not to by Diet Sage's Kit Yates. Fake Heroes by Otto English. And Bringing Down Goliath by Jolyon Morn, right?
Classic.
So I'll read out a couple of quotes, and it's always the same type of people, literally often the very same person, right? So here's Chris Van Tulleken talking about one of these books. Beautifully written, scholarly, funny, and bound together with a compelling personal and professional narrative. Second quote about this book, James O'Brien, inspiring and illuminating. Any guesses?
How to Expect the Unexpected, or whatever it's called.
I've got no idea.
That was is actually Bringing Down Goliath by Jolyon Morn.
Oh, of course. I just thought, the personal angle, that makes sense.
The personal angle, yeah.
Jolyon Morn's glorious failures.
Second one, right. Quote from James O'Brien again. Absolutely fascinating, he says. Quote from Chris Van Tulleken again. An exceptional book, readable, funny, and more needed than ever. They are a bit interchangeable, these quotes, which is kind of my point.
It's either Otto or the Bell End. It's surely one of those two. I mean, that's a bit of a confusing way to put it because they're both bell ends, but you see what I mean.
Leo, any guess?
No, I have no idea.
That was actually Kit Yates recently published How to Expect the Unexpected.
Oh.
Okay, third one. I've just got the one quote for this. It's a familiar face. James O'Brien says, a brilliant book. I know there's not much of a clue there. So we've already knocked 2 out though, so it's a 1 in 3 shot.
Yeah, that's true.
It can't really be James O'Brien's as well if you think about it.
Yeah, I think it could be.
I think that's more likely, if anything.
You think he might do that?
I mean, the title of that book is an endorsement of it. What? So we got Fake Heroes.
Correct. Well done.
There we go.
2 more to go. Once again, James O'Brien. Scurrilous, scandalous, and frequently disgusting. I absolutely loved it. And then we've got Danny Wallace. Awfully hilarious and hilariously awful. Now, process of elimination should make this fairly easy, to be honest.
So the Danny Wallace is to be James O'Brien.
Surely this has got to be the 52 Times Britain Was a Bell End.
Correct. Which can only leave 1 book left, of course, but let's just go through it properly, like in lottery balls. So, How to Be Right by James O'Brien was described by Jamie Oliver as a simply brilliant read. I love this book. And Funny, Wise and Passionate by Danny Wallace. My point being, it's always the same people pretty much, isn't it? On this log-rolling circuit of minor celebrities who are each writing their own mediocre books, praising other people's mediocre books.
James O'Brien must do nothing else but read by people who work at Byline Times.
It does seem like it, doesn't it? He does his couple of hours on LBC and then just tucks up with a bad book.
But no, we should definitely return to that subset of the centrist dads, checking from them from time to time. It's kind of an underlying theme of this podcast anyway, I've kind of noticed.
Well, yeah, this thing with Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall and the posh people having a go at the exploitation of fossil fuels. I mean, the use of fossil fuels is the main thing that sort of powered the Industrial Revolution and led to this incredible increase in living standards that made things like protein available to working class people. all the things that pretty much the whole nation enjoys now. Leisure time, protein, entertainment that have greatly enhanced their lives and led to longer, healthier, or not always healthier, but certainly longer lives. Are due to the exploitation of fossil fuels. Whereas, Hugh Fairley-Whittenstill, his ancestors would have enjoyed, they wouldn't have been suffering from protein deficiency or anything like that because they were already posh. So, I just find it's almost like, Hugh Fairley-Whittenstill saying to poor people, you have to suffer. You have to suffer so that, I can feel good about this. You have to go back to, your children dying young and not enjoying yourselves. And the whole sort of green movement is gonna push so many, such a large proportion of the population into, if not poverty, then certainly take away a lot of the things that they would have enjoyed, like flying overseas on holiday. That's going to be taxed out of existence for a lot of people.
That's already getting a lot more expensive. And you're so right, though, that link between people who are really environmentalists and then being members of the landed gentry or the old aristocracy. The sort of people who probably did think that, the move away from feudalism was a mistake.
Yeah. And also it's interesting what Chris says about, these posh boys would have been vicars at one point, because I do feel that the sort of the move towards atheism has left a hole in people's lives, and they're filling it with whatever it is, whatever activism or whatever crazy things they can latch onto. I mean, the whole of wokeism and social justice is basically a religion, critical race theory, and all the rest of it. It's Black Lives Matter. You've even got all the religious things like taking the knee instead of bowing to pray or whatever. I think like we got rid of religion and we've sort of replaced it with this like worse religion. And at least with the Bible, you knew where you were with the Bible. It's written down. It's literally written on stone tablets. They don't change that often. But with wokeism, oh my God, what's the right thing to do and say? Like changes every week. I mean, Joanna Cherry or J.K. Rowling, a couple of years ago, they were the perfect example of a woke feminist with all the right opinions. Then, the sands shift underneath them and all of a sudden it's like, oh, what? You don't think that, men in frocks should be rubbing their testicles on little kids' faces? Oh, you're a bigot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there was that actress, was it Amanda Abingdon, who's been in TV and things. She's had to apologise because she said that exactly the sort of drag queen event that you sort of gestured to there, Leo, one of the ones that did the rounds, because she said it was inappropriate for like a toddler to be in such close proximity to a bloke in thigh-high boots and a G-string. She's now had to apologise whilst insisting that she is still an ally of the trans community. That's happened in like the past 24 hours or so. So it is as ridiculous as all of that. We haven't got much time left, but I want to squeeze in one postbag question. Postbag.
It's bulging, eh?
It's on quite a newsy topic, which hopefully both of you will be across because I haven't been at all, I will admit. Why is it that the Tory government, usually chomping at the bit to impose some ban, is refusing to update the Dangerous Dogs Act to ban American Bully XLs? Chris, do you have a view on this hot topic as it's been in the news recently?
Oh, no. Well, yes, I think it should be banned, I think. But the Dangerous Dog Act it sort of goes down in legend as being one of the most useless pieces of legislation ever. And I can never remember why that is. Because I do remember very clearly in some late 80s, early 90s, I think Rottweilers then got banned. Can anyone remember? Is that right? Are Rottweilers banned? Right?
I don't know if they are. I know American pit bulls or certain pit bulls were banned under it. I was actually working as a criminal intelligence analyst in the sort of noughties, and the dangerous, we'd have a lot of calls for because I was working in Haringey, so there's a lot of gangs with dogs. And they're doing horrible stuff, like they grab like an old lady's cat and use it for training the dog to fight. They'd hang it from a tree or whatever, and the dog would rip this cat apart, or they'd just throw the cat to the dogs. So, really nasty stuff. And the gang members would love having these dogs because it was basically, if you had a knife or a gun, you could go to jail forever if you stabbed somebody. If you've got a dog and you set the dog on someone, you're not doing any jail time. It's ridiculous. So it's a way around that. It's protection to intimidate people. The Dangerous Dogs Act. I think it's because to prove that something's a breed. So many dogs will have like a little bit of DNA in them, from a different kind of dog. They would then say, "Oh, it's not an American Pit Bull or whatever. It's got this other DNA in it." And also, the process of getting the DNA and all the rest of it. It's like, it's sort of like Elizabeth Warren saying she's 0.0008% Cherokee or whatever. It's just
It was easy to get around, you mean? The legislation wasn't... It was a bit like the legal highs. Every time they ban a legal high, somebody just slightly changed the molecular structure and you'd have another legal high.
Yeah.
I think that's probably it. I think it was considered to be a great failure as legislation just because people just got equally vicious dogs that just weren't whatever that had been banned. And maybe that could happen again. I don't know. I mean, we always end this show by asking our guest, as we will in a second, Leo, what they'd like to see banned. Personally, I would ban people owning dogs in cities. I know it's not a very popular view, but I don't think it's generally it's not very fair on the dogs who really want to be running around a lot. It's not particularly fair on the neighbours who have to put up with the barking all the time. So, keep these wild animals in the wild, I think.
I really like that as a ban as well, because especially like post-lockdown, it's just people who clearly probably haven't owned dogs before, but they just try and fold them into their usual life. So they take them to the pub, they take them on the tube, even when it doesn't really work. It's just very, very irritating. We should ask that question, Leo, because probably since the last time we've been on, we've taken to asking our guests, because this is obviously a very libertarian podcast. If you were able to have one ban, just one kind of freebie, on your principles, as it were, and it can't be something worthy, it can't be banning hunger or destitution or whatever, just something that really irritates you, what would you ban?
Well, I got to say, I'm really surprised to see that IEA and Spike come out in favour of a nanny state ban on dogs.
The more dangerous, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but no, man, I totally agree. Especially now I've got a baby. You sort of realise, if my baby's sitting in the park or something, and some one of these devil dogs comes along and decides to eat it. And also you see every day when you open the paper, not that I open the paper because who reads a paper anymore, but you see these toddlers getting torn apart by a family pet, and they're like, "Oh, it's so fine with it's like, what do you mean it's fine? It's a dog. It's at some point, your toddler's going to stick its thumb up its ass and the dog's going to go crazy and eat the toddler." So yeah, ban dogs.
But they always say, "I'd never done this before. It wouldn't hurt a fly."
Yeah. So
you're saying ban all dogs, Leo? Is that what we're going?
Yeah, like if you're in the city, obviously, I used to, when I lived in the countryside, my dad had a dog, like a gun dog, but he was trained to go and collect, pheasants and geese and all the rest of it when they're shot. Springer Spaniel. That was a great dog, a nice, friendly dog, not one of these devil dogs. But other stuff I'd ban, I'm not sure. I'd have to think about that.
Well, we'll definitely have you back on, probably this time next year for another kind of Edinburgh update or similar. But before we go, Leo, is there anything that you want to promote to our listeners out there?
Yeah, my YouTube channel, it's doing all right now. I've got 64,000 subscribers, so I do videos on there, just going off my nut about stuff. And that's it. And also, if you're up at the Fringe, go and see Hate and Live, and also Darius Davies, Charmingly Offensive.
Brilliant. Leo, Chris, thanks so much.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Last Orders. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Please do take a moment to leave us a rating and a review. And if you'd like to support the show, why not become a Spiked supporter? Just go to spiked-online.com/supporters to sign up. That's spiked-online.com/supporters.